sure he has.
Or I can just get it.
Told him.
It'll be a big envelope, so I
Yeah.
can't send it.
Yeah, I can pick it up at different time.
It's not too much, it just takes some time.
Yeah.
to do the package.
Doesn't that stop everything kind of?
They're not organized.
The guy they're buying it from, they probably haven't reached a conclusion. So what do we do? Oh, maybe.
She had to text me when we
Maybe.
broke bill, so.
So you're
I know
gonna combine this one with
Joe,
Mark, or this
the
one?
engineer, had the same problem. Where are we?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe they did figure that.
Okay.
Why would we even do that if they can't, you know? You assume they've done it, as long as it's this one. But we still, that seems like critical to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
That's. We're gonna get a hernia carrying all these plans.
What's that? I will, yeah.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Call to order the February 26, 2018 special meeting of the Planning Commission. Roll call.
Sure, Mr. Cox?
Here.
Mr. Poser?
Here.
Mr. Westbrook?
Here.
Mr. Chivone? Mr. Velada?
Here. All right, first item on our agenda is the KFC. Guys, come on up and why don't, give us a brief overview of what's occurred since last meeting, and we'll go over any comments.
Sure. Ryan Grasso with Cedarwood Development, Alessio Franco with KFC. Good day. Really, major things that have transpired since last we had met. We appeared before the Board of Zoning Appeals. I don't have the exact date, but we were granted 2 variances, both of which are addressed in Mr. Prince's current report to you. That being the buffer green space requirement along State Route 8, we were granted a 10-foot variance to allow a bypass lane, and we were also granted a variance on the required number of spaces, requiring 33 spaces for this building in its current configuration. So those 2 items have been addressed and approved by the DZA. We've seen Mr. Francis and Mr. Gelati's reports. We take no issue with anything that's raised in any of them, and I'm sure we could, prior to final submission and permit approval, address all those issues that are raised. What I have in front of you here is a colored representation of the site plan. The only difference between this and what is in your packet, in order to help enhance the landscape area, we have duplicated the fence, the decorative screen fence with the masonry pilasters and the wrought iron looking black fencing in between. We have duplicated a section of that to go along the sidewalk and building area here to help shield, be a secondary shield to the parking along the main building. The other thing, we have continued to refine the building architecture. And I have here a couple of 3D renderings of what is currently in your package to help illustrate, what we are doing here. So this view is basically as if you would be southbound on State Route 8 before you get to Highland Road. This bump out portion of the building here represents the bump out here. As you can see, the red brick with architectural point detailing, the mansard and gable roofs, all the trim is white. We do have a wainscot of a darker, I don't want to say black, but darker tone brick along the bottom, along with a water table quartz, and of course representation of the masonry piers and fencing that will appear toward Highland Road and State Route 8. This view here is if you were coming northbound on Route 8 before you get to Highland Road. Of course, this will be the drive-through window, which is illustrated right here. You do have a combination of real and faux windows, much like you see on the Chick-fil-A down the road, not to talk about another property. We've incorporated some decorative lighting that is carried throughout the entire building to help tie this whole thing together. So, really pending your questions, that's where we're at. And we're asking for a, I guess it would be a conditional approval, final site plan approval, so we can submit for our final building permits and start construction right away is the intent.
Okay, let's see. Brian, you go first, on additional comments?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report, February 17th. Sounds like item 1 and 2 were taken care of by the Board of Zoning Appeals. We had a little discussion just prior to the meeting about the variance issue and the way the draft minutes are written. It's a moot point, so my comment regarding the deficiency of 8 spaces really is not an issue if that's truly what was discussed at BZA, and it sounds like it was. So I just asked the administrative assistant to the BZA just to confirm the minutes, but they're written that way, so they improved the actual number of spaces at 33, which is what's shown on the plan. So that's a good thing for the applicant. An item that just sort of remains from the last time, the one-way drive exit from the site to the private driveway. Just felt that should be reduced in width to 12 feet. To sort of. Sure, if you want, my feeling was just to sort of choke off the traffic and make it clearly defined one way out.
And we don't disagree with you. The only point that I have, that is the exit route for our delivery vehicles, the semi-trucks. And 12 feet gets really tight, especially when you make that radius. I believe it should have been part of your submission package. There should have been truck turning movements on one of the drawings that show that that's really the minimum footage. If you want it 12 feet, we'll make it 12 feet. Maybe we have some mountable curbs or something there, so a truck just doesn't drive all over the landscaping and curbing. But you know, if it's got to be 12 feet, we'll make it work. But there is a reason why it's 15.
Was it something, was it bigger than that before?
It was 18 feet originally.
Okay.
And looking at the truck turn movements and the geometrics of the way it's aligned, we feel that 15 feet is the minimum that's going to allow it to operate. 15.
Can I ask a question? Peter, Brian, the 12 feet is the minimum, and it's only because we're afraid people won't read the one-way sign. Is that kind of why they're doing that? They're afraid they can't read the sign or something, that it's one way, and they might think it's two-way if it's.
It's too big, yeah, if it's too big, and I think it was even bigger before, so we did some reduction, but.
But I don't see that as a real problem. Most people can read, and
Wow. Or can and choose to do so.
yeah. I mean, if that's the reason, to be afraid of people won't read the sign and don't enter this way, that kind of thing.
Again, I'll leave that up to the purview of planning board. If it's got to be 12 feet, we'll make it work.
So again, I was just trying to choke it down to, but 15 feet, I mean, if that's for the turning movement, the engineer we're talking about, I mean, if that's the turning radius, the width needed for that turning movement for semi-tractor trailer, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there is some, you've had some reduction. 18 is, I mean, you could fit 2 cars through there. So I think you made an effort. I think it was a good point. I'm okay with, I think, with the 15. And we've got the dual mounted signs on either side of the same way, unless you guys have a different feeling. I think Tony thinks it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're still going, Brian?
Yeah, sorry for.
Oh, that's okay. And so then I just said a stop sign or some kind of ground markings should be added at the end of the drive-through lane to avoid conflicts. Something simple, just to.
Yep.
People don't tend to, especially when they're getting their coffee or their chicken, whatever it may be.
One hand in the bucket, the other on the wheel.
And, yeah,
Don't get your deals confused.
yeah. Very good point. So, and then, I just said the site curbing along that northernmost two-way drive aisle extends into the subject property. I think it's clear that that would be, so maybe just a note or something on a plan. And then, the shared two-way access driveway on the north side of the parcel is just under 20 feet of pavement, or the code requires 22 feet of pavement.
That was an error. We'll correct it.
Okay. Then signage is, really for a separate submittal. I think you'll submit separately, but, the biggest thing is only one sign per building elevation is permissible pursuant to the code. So you'll have to do something with that. The main elevation facing the parking lot contains 2 signs. So you'll have to address that. And then, there's the, sort of the proportion of deciduous and non-deciduous trees. So I'd suggested some firs and spruces be added to the site to sort of blend out that proportion, because right now I think there's not very many deciduous trees.
Well, on this latest, and now we look at the landscape plan, we have 2 deciduous and 3 coniferous trees for a total of 5.
I'll take a look at it again. I mean, it'd be a final administrative approval typically if the commission's okay with that. But, just felt that there should be, some additional trees added along, Highland adjacent to both sides of the ground monument sign.
Okay.
And you could do ornamentals or something that are salt tolerant. Then the photometric plan was, it was pretty tough to read. It's on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, kind of blurred, so just on a future submittal. And then the commission has always sort of historically utilized 1 foot candle at non-residential property lines, so just try to stay within that. They don't like to have, a lot of light pollution off-site. Again, keep it to 1 foot candle. You could do that with the type of luminaires you use and shielding.
Correct, and then the only point that I made last meeting, and I continue to make it, is we do have a common access drive here that isn't lit. So part of what we were trying to do at the common access drive was provide some lighting to keep that drive lit and safe. So either I balance it and we have below 1 foot candle, or we get some consideration. I think I agree on all the other property lines that will comply. I just question along the shared access drive.
Do you think that would be okay, Brian, if their hills are a little high
Yeah.
on the driveway side?
I mean, the commission could do that. I mean, it seemed maybe there could be some coordination between the 2 parcels and doing some lighting in the roadway as well. I mean, I guess some consideration. You could have cross agreements between the 2 for some sort of lighting in the median strip there. So there's some options.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say, compliment that the architecture looks very good. It was significantly improved since last time you came in, and just wanted to confirm is that a metal gate with metal slats? It looks like that was the case for the dumpster enclosure.
I believe the intent is to do just what we did over at the Starbucks,
Okay.
Starbucks property, which I think has been received well.
Sure. And then the rear elevation, there's a ladder on the back, and then there's some space below the ladder and below the sign. I'm just not sure what that, maybe I'm just, maybe I'm dense and I'm missing it, but that.
So what that is you see that pop out there? That's to the left of that, right?
Okay, yep.
So that's meant to be sort of like remove this element so you could see that's the cooler box, but that pop-out element
I got
hides
you.
it. And
Okay.
it's of its sufficient height to completely cover the cooler box.
So that's bricked in the back?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's fine. And coined just
Yes.
like it is, okay. I do see the pop out, and I was apparently dense, because I was not getting that. Yeah, with that said, again, I thought it was a much improved plan, and, I don't necessarily have a problem with, if the commission wants to move forward with a final approval as well, and not have the applicant come back, I'd be fine with that, and, subject to a final administrative review of the plans by the engineer and myself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chairman. I'm not going to go through each comment here. Most of my comments are detailed engineering comments, which, Brian, you can give directly to your design engineer. But in general, from an engineering point of view, I'm comfortable if the Planning Commission wants to give a conditional approval to the applicant pending our final administrative engineering review and permitting.
Mr. Chairman, one very ticky-tacky minor thing, sorry. Could, any future submittals, could you have them stapled? So they're just difficult to review them when they're not stapled.
Can we please see it?
Thank you so much. That
Free of
goes to
charge,
all
I hope.
applicants. Thank you.
What did Brian suggest, we do a final approval, or, and you said a conditional approval, I confused a little bit, what do you think we ought to do?
You know, having some conditions like administrative review for final landscaping, condition of them making the back driveway, what was it, 22 feet instead of 20.
So we don't have to come back here, is
Yes,
that?
they have to come
Yeah.
back with those couple of minor things.
Right.
Unless somebody,
Yeah.
yeah, I think signage, I don't know what your plan, what you're thinking, but I think to have both the words and the kernel on there, that would be a BZA issue as well, right? So you can either fix it, agree to take off one or the other, or for the BZA, I think is the.
What if we make it all one? I don't know if it's
Yeah.
possible for me to even do, but.
I would say that whoever you're going to use for your sign company, if you're going to use somebody to submit it, I mean, it's probably a valid opportunity to combine them together. You just want to look at your total area, see what you're allowed, and stay within those requirements and keep it to one sign on the sign face. I think that's certainly something you could do.
Okay, thanks.
So I think it's probably have to come back for the signage, at least, you know, maybe everybody else thinks, but, what are their thoughts?
The color rendition, is that the exact color that the brick is going to be, or usually we get a sample of the brick to see what it's going to be?
Well, the exact materials were called out on a schedule.
Well,
I didn't realize, that's my error, I didn't realize we have to have staples. I will say it's in keeping with the same red as all the other buildings around here. It's the same building firms like this. And you can make that a condition as well. But, you know, the color rendering and printers can only render as well as they
Exactly,
can render.
that makes
Yeah, I
sense.
know, this looks a little more orangey,
Right.
but the intent
I'd
is,
be happy approving that color.
yeah, the intent is to be Macedonia standard.
Guys, you have anything over here? So,
Well, I have just a question, I don't, the engineer, as an example, saying water must be captured prior to reaching the access drive at the town. Now, who's gonna verify that that's done?
So I guess you know, most of those, I think almost everything in here is
in and out, whatever.
Okay.
I noticed the one, the 18-wheeler had to go through the parking area to make the turn.
Right.
When's he coming in and out then?
Off hours. We don't open until 10:30 in the morning. Deliveries are made before that.
But that was just one other comment. We're okay with the 15.
I think I am. I don't know if everybody else has a
I'm
problem with
okay
it.
with it.
And your truck, your delivery guys, they're pretty dependable. They're not. Oh, yeah, they're supposed to be the best.
Surveyor, they're nationally all around, yeah.
I'm sure you're gonna flip a lid if they show up at, 11:45.
Then I'm losing money.
Yeah, so I guess we're probably pretty sure that you're not gonna let that happen. Send them packing for a couple hours. Then there were a couple of the issues with, I think if we make the motion, if we do accept
I'm
it.
thinking this is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, right. Okay, now, I'm just gonna mention, have you done anything with the permit requirements to the other agencies yet? Like to, NEORSD?
No, we have not done any construction
You haven't done
documents.
anything yet to anybody else?
No, sir. Other than, we did get approval from DOT to remove the chain link fence and put the decorative fence in place. And I think I provided that proof too.
Yeah, if you could provide us with that, that approval from the DOT, because I haven't seen it yet. But that would be good for our records here at the City Hall.
Yes. But to answer your question, Mr. Lonnie, no. The next step is Mr. Alessio will have a detailed set of construction drawings done, both civil and building, and submit those to all the different agencies. And I know your process before Mr. Sokoloff, whoever issues the final building permit, we have to provide proof of all those other agencies approving.
My only point was that stormwater can be a tricky situation sometimes in development of parcels.
Well, the good news is our pre and post, we're actually increasing the impervious area, decreasing the impervious area. So in that case, we actually are making it better than it currently is today. So we should be able to. And I know preliminary stormwater reports have already been submitted, and they have looked at that. So there is a plan on how to make it work. What isn't done yet is the details of making that system.
My point, I didn't want to get too far along, then you find out, you have to make major revisions to accommodate that.
I'm not anticipating any, I don't.
No, Mr. Chavone, I think he's safe in that regard on this site.
Okay.
Any other comments? Suppose we make it a list. I think you were.
Checking it twice.
But I think, yeah.
You wanna make our motion?
Couple things, yeah, that you mentioned. If somebody wants to take it.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve based on the administrative approval of the landscaping plan, the photometric plan, and recolor to match the city town center standard. Do we need to include the 22 foot instead of the 20? Okay. And that
Actually,
the-
Mr. Posar, the set of plans I have shows 22 feet for that driveway. Leave it in the motion then.
Okay. And that the two-way shared access drive be 22 feet instead of the marked 20 feet.
Get all that?
Did you
I think so.
mention the painting, the signs that you mentioned?
Motion
Yeah,
to
but-
approve based on administratively approved landscaping, photometric, color to match the city standard, 22 feet, two-way shared access. I'm getting better at this.
So we've got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Did you cover the photometrics?
Yes.
He did.
Yeah.
He did, he
We
mentioned.
covered we're not the 12 feet, we're gonna allow 15 feet.
I wonder if it, I think guess that's on the plan, I think, if we wanna do something
So
besides.
that's submitted.
That's submitted.
That was on there, yeah.
All right, so we got a motion and a second, any more discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Appreciate your time, gentlemen.
Well, here, thank you. Appreciate the time.
I think Brian's mentioned before, we should probably specifically mention items. He was saying, we'll make a motion to approve as per your memo, or, you know, or as we did, where we specifically called out the items that.
I think it's fine either way. I mean, even if they're, my memo included some things that were, that had variances in them, in this case, calling them out specifically is probably fine. So, either way, you can do it by sourcing the documents, it's fine.
That way, I'm sure that nothing gets eliminated or
Sure.
whatever, you know.
More
It's
comprehensive.
easier for everybody.
Yep.
That way your
Yeah,
numbers become
you're not
more
repeating
out.
yourself.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, exactly.
I think that's fine.
Particularly when you get a memo from them that we're not varied from at all.
Right.
You're moving in.
All right, next item is Dunkin' Donuts.
So I'm going on record by saying we're stapled.
We stay
Or
home.
it's stapled, you're good. You're good.
Yes, Staples and-
Mine was not stapled. Oh, you know what, it was stapled at one point.
Uh-oh.
Everyone's
There's
Remove the staple.
there's a hamburglar out there with a stapler in his hand.
Stay home regular.
This is you.
It might have been me when I scanned it.
It's okay.
I can't scan it, it's the-
The last one definitely had not been stapled.
We splurge.
All right, Dunkin' Donuts. Why don't you guys want to give us an overview of what's changed since the last time you were here?
Sure, we've been able to, address some of the crossings criteria now that we knew what jurisdiction we were under and whose criteria we were supposed to be following. So we've been able to make a few adjustments to the plan, however, the plan is very long and narrow, so some of the side setbacks and the landscape buffer, we tried to do as much as we could to meet your requirements, but it is an unusual site. We still have not secured the strip of land.
But we're getting closer.
Yeah, we're getting closer, and a preliminary approval of the plan will go a long way towards making that happen. It's kind of a waiting on one of the, yeah.
We're making progress. I would say we now have a verbal agreement, but until I close on the strip of land, I'm not gonna feel victorious on this one. It's just an unusual situation dealing with this individual, and I mean nothing negative by it at all, except that, you know, it hasn't been a black and white, cut and dry. We're pretty straightforward people, and, you know, usually, and we move fast, so if I make an offer, I am not used to waiting like 3 weeks for somebody to get back to me and then not giving me a clear response back. And then they go dark for extended periods of time, but I think we're making progress on that strip of land. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll get to the finish line before all my kids graduate college.
So we've added the deceleration lane, it's been preliminary, approach to from the ODOT approval. And we changed some of the landscaping based on last night's comments. And we added the bollards back by the.
We took out a parking space or two in the front for the drive-through. I think that was a comment that you made. And I know one of the other changes I asked them to make based on the discussion that we had, which I thought was a good one, is that we're gonna try and have each lot be a self-contained lot when it comes to stormwater management. So we're gonna have our lot manage its stormwater, and when and if, because it may never get developed, if something happens on the second lot, that lot will maintain its own stormwater situation. So we think that's a better alternative, and because who knows what's going to happen with that lot, if anything.
Sure. So, my report dated February 24th. So, a few new things, and I agree, there were definitely some updates and such that if I didn't capture it in this report, that just meant it had been addressed. And maybe I would have captured one or two of the comments and just said it still remains an item. But since the last meeting, the city did provide me with the full jet agreement, which does have an addendum that was, I think, in July of '95. And that addendum does state that the city does sort of retain control over approving the plans, subject to approval or input from the JED board. The zoning of the property remains classified under the township C4 zoning. So, with that said, I really don't know what zoning we use to review the thing, I'll be honest with you.
Most liberal one, of course.
Yeah, yeah. It seems to me that it would be whatever the township C4 zoning is. Now, with that said, I've sort of been reviewing it against the city's zoning, and for the most part, it complies in general, substantially complies. And then, of course, reviewing it against the development criteria for the crossings as well. I also think that the Macedonia sign code does seem to apply to the signage being requested. So that's where I'm at. I'm not sure if it's in the right place, but I'm there.
And with respect to signage, you know, I know we're gonna have to give a sign back on the one elevation, but we've got the two. Listen, you try for everything, but I noticed they just failed, so I will get it better. But we are gonna seek a variance, you know, through the BZA process, or maybe it's through the JED board process, whatever the process is for the
Area.
for the signage and the digital LED sign as well. So
Yeah, and so I really don't have any guidance for you who you get, and I'm going to use air quotes, a variance from, because I
Right.
just really don't know. Whether it's the Board of Zoning Appeals for Macedonia, whether it's something from the township. I think the JED board certainly should have input on that as well.
Perhaps that's a question for the Macedonia Law Director.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it is. So with that said, the comments that I have, this discussion about the cross access, the criteria for the crossings does require it, and that's between both properties, so you need it to the vacant lot as well as to Giant Eagle. What I don't know is if anybody's had conversation with Giant Eagle yet.
I think the mayor's been leading the charge on that, so.
Okay.
He seems pretty confident. Of course, he was confident on other things too, but I think he seems pretty confident that's gonna be part of the process, that's gonna happen. They're aware of it and they're
Yeah.
okay with it.
And I'm just thinking for coordination, you know,
Right.
in terms of how it lays out the easement, the cross
Right, the
access, and,
language,
right,
So that's one of
so,
the holdups with Mr. Klein, is that we're offering him cross-access. And so we've taken it upon ourselves to draft language on the cross-access in advance, so that doesn't become a stumbling block
sure.
at the finish line on the 1 yard line.
Yeah, and so that, the language itself, so for the planning commission's sake,
Yeah.
they're more interested to see that it's there.
Right.
And the actual language would be generally approved by the city's legal department. So that was comment one. And then there's this 5-foot buffer yard, curb to property line.
Well, if we get the 7-foot strip out.
It would take care of it, that's right, yeah. So and I don't know, I think you met with the JED board, is that correct?
I have not, but I know the mayor's, they had a meeting.
Okay.
And presented.
Yeah, they did discuss it at the last JED board meeting, and if it helps, you know, I've actually got the language of the motion that was made at that meeting. If you want me to read it into the record, I can do that.
Chairman?
Oh, yes, please.
Sure, thanks, Chairman.
Let you guys figure it out. Yes.
Motion from the JED board was, in quotes, to approve the support of construction of a right-in and right-out access drive for the proposed Dunkin' Donuts site, identifying an acceleration and deceleration lane onto Route 82. So the JED board was in favor of the Dunkin' Donuts proposal, so long as the driveway is right in and right out.
Do you know, did they address, anybody know if they addressed this issue of the 5-foot buffer yard, or if they had any conversation, if you don't get the strip, how that all plays out?
They didn't go into
Okay.
that level of detail at the JED board meeting.
Okay, well, so it remains an issue that
Okay.
will eventually have to be worked out. And then, there's the 5-foot wide planting area along the building's prime facade, the west building elevation. Looks like you provided a 3-foot strip now of, blue rug junipers, which, you know, again, it's supposed to be 5 feet, so you just, if that'd be something you'd wanna talk to the JED board about also, as well as this commission. I mean, 2 feet's not a significant issue if you can get the row of junipers in there. I'm not an enormous fan of the blue rug juniper, just because once it starts to die, it dies and it's really ugly, but, you know, maybe Taxus would fit in there or something. Maybe
Is there a reason why you're doing 3 feet and not 5?
Well, there's only so much width to the
Yeah.
lot, so that's just part of the sacrifice that you make to get the parking. We really want the parking to be at 90 degrees. You know, the alternative would be to make it on an angle, which would give you a little bit more space, but then it requires a one-directional flow. It would really, you know, if this ends up getting developed, it would be then a two-way flow.
Yeah. I, from a recommendation standpoint, I'd rather see the parking configured how it is and give up the 5 and go to 3 and just put maybe a different, like I said, a different landscape species in there, or mix it up a little bit even too, so.
Because that's in the criteria, does that have to be
I don't know.
a variance, you know, whatever that might be?
I think it's probably something that the JED board could recommend and you guys could accept. I don't know that there's a variance procedure, again, because
Right.
it's a gray area in my opinion. So, I think what makes good sense, and 3 feet seems fine. If it's gonna alter the parking layout to angle parking, I'd rather not do that and have 3 feet. And then just the comment 5's pretty, just each 150 square feet of landscape area is required to contain a canopy tree and 3 to 5 shrubs. You probably meet it, just show some sort of a calculation on the plan, or I'm sure you can run it through AutoCAD or to determine that. And then just general comments, photometric plan for future submittals, the stormwater management, the cross-access. Oh, this is actually a little bit of a bigger issue. The cross-access between the Giant Eagle site and the subject site. So it looks like it's about 24 feet coming in, and then it increases to like 30 feet. So I would rather see that. My recommendation to the commission would be keep it 24 feet consistently. And so instead of, I actually said make a bigger tree lawn, but I think looking at it, you're gonna need to increase your landscape area along the front of your building. You can make a bigger landscape area, and by reducing down to 24 feet. Correct, yeah. I don't think you probably wanna shift everything, but I'll leave that up to you.
I see, okay.
Wind up with a
I
bigger
understand
tree
where-
lot on 82.
Yeah.
Just from
Right.
comfortability as people drive.
Yeah.
And our code requires 24 max. It's just
Okay.
better to keep it consistent.
Right.
In my opinion.
You don't
I
have
think
any-
we might have kept it wide because it's also parking with cars back and forth into each other.
24 feet's pretty wide
Okay.
for a
No
driveway.
issues with that? His recommendation?
No, I have no issues with that. I was just trying to see it, because I pour coffee, but I understood it, so I'm just proud of myself. Sometimes I'm just proud of myself that I understand what you guys are talking about. So I got it, yeah.
And then you'll have a bigger tree lawn, or landscaping along 82.
No, we're actually gonna end up pulling the building up to make it work.
Because I think they need to hold this edge over here to make it line up with the.
That's right.
You're gonna move the building up.
So move,
Yeah.
the ability to work, increase this.
Yeah, we have to match up the Giant Eagle parking.
You
Yeah.
can increase it, and maybe that's even something that gets mentioned, Jay, you know, we've got substandard, we got 3 feet instead of 5 over here,
But we
we're
do
gonna
extra.
we're gonna add another 6 feet over here.
Right. So people can see.
Well, Brian's recommending moving, the parking down, moving it down south 6 feet.
I
And
think
not
he
going
changed,
north.
I think he changed his mind.
I'm not sure what election I'm in, so I'm flip-flopping, but yeah, I think sliding it up is probably the better route.
He's flip-flop.
Yeah, but the intent is to have the cross-access width match the drive
You
aisle
know,
width.
the idea is to have it line up.
Yeah.
Have it lined up.
Yep, have it lined up.
Yeah,
have-
the turn, right.
Yep, yeah.
Because I've seen them when they have to.
Yeah.
Whatever you gotta
Yeah.
do, line it up and keep it at 20 feet.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and it's better for
And
your
we have the opportunity
customers.
to do it, so might as well get it right.
Sure. The eastern building elevation now contains an additional gable, sort of break up the expanse of that wall. That was a nice addition. It was called out, bubbled out on the plans there to the left, yeah. That seems to, I was gonna recommend maybe coining a little bit too on that brick, but the price of coffee may go up, so we better be fair here. So, and then, you probably don't wanna do that alignment of the front door. I think you gave it pretty good. I left it as a comment. Internally, it probably makes a challenge. It just feels like looking at it, it should be, but
You're never gonna see it like that though, when you approach that.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that when you see it in person,
Yeah.
it just looks right.
yeah,
You know, but a flat, two-dimensional,
sure.
you know, AutoCAD drawing, it looks a little funky, but I think when you see it live, you're not gonna notice it.
Is that how your other store is now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Wonder why I didn't mention anything.
Well, the one in the other store's got the doorway in the front.
Yeah.
But if you go down to Twinsburg, for example.
It's like that.
It's not like that.
And then the rest of the memo focuses on signage because there was more detail this time about the signage. And I will say, so I said 40 square feet in item number 2, the comments that the ground sign can be 40 square feet. It's actually 45 in the crossings criteria, which changes your, so if you went to a 45 square foot ground sign, you could have, provided dynamic displays are even allowable,
Right.
you could have then more dynamic display. So it would be whatever, at 40 square feet, it's 12, so it'd be like 13 or 14 square feet of dynamic display if you went to a 45 square foot ground sign.
Yeah.
The bottom line is on your signage, you have way more than you're allowed for the site. You're over,
It looks really good.
you're significantly over signed.
200 square feet's a lot over.
Well, that's because this one, right, 'cause that's one that,
Yeah, in this one, there's only going to be one on each
Right.
elevation.
but
so-
this one adds up to a lot of space because of the way it gets measured.
It's a huge,
Yeah,
It's a s-
we look at it as art, not really a sign, but.
it's a sign under the
It'll-
code.
It'll be sacrificed, I think.
I think that, you know, the commission has dealt with that issue on actually a number of buildings
Right.
and awnings over the years and have held fairly fast that
Right.
it's not permissible, but that definitely increases your total sign area significantly.
Right, yeah, that's the one
Yeah.
that's usually, as much as I try to fight for it, and if anybody from Tesla, we've been recorded. I fought for it, but if I have to give it up,
I think that, from a branding standpoint, if we don't know it's a Dunkin' Donuts, we're in trouble, because your branding is really good.
we try.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have a fair amount of signage on there, so that drives up. So whatever you ultimately do, I think we're gonna need some direction on how to do exceptions to the area. Because if it's under the Macedonia process, it'd be a variance. If you were to eliminate that, that's 168 square feet. So, you're
Yeah,
significantly there to reduce your signage.
Right, I suspect if we just go with the two signs, and I think that's what we have,
You'd be
That
real
was great.
close, yeah.
We should be able, I mean, I don't remember if we got a variance on signage when we did
I
do
don't
that.
think you did.
That's, with the everything, I think, met the code. We had a lot of setback variances on that site, but, I don't think we had sign variances, so I think if we hopefully come in with a similar sign package, that'd be, acceptable.
So my recommendation to the commission was, I think the plans are sufficient for a preliminary plan approval. And so if the commission agrees, I think it would be fine to sort of, do a parlay a little bit on the signage and have you go back to the drawing board and reconsider what you are willing to give up. In the meantime, if it's that large, 168 square foot, and then you reduce to one sign on your elevation there, like you said, you likely are gonna be there, and in conformance with our requirements, then there would be no need to have exceptions, most likely. So, but that's up to the commission, but that'd be my recommendation.
Question, is the confusion because we're in the JEDD here, we don't know who has the authority on the sign?
Well, the way the JED agreement reads is that, the amendment or addendum to the JED in July of '95 gave approval authority over development plans to the city. And then it says the zoning classification remains a C4, which is a township zoning classification. Unless Mr. Gelati read it differently, I didn't see anything in there that said, oh, well, it remains C4, use this standard, and Macedonia will enforce township zoning standards. It doesn't say that, so it's kind of a gray area. That may be how it shakes out, but it certainly isn't applying the city's adjoining zoning, which is B3. B3 is the adjoining city zoning district. I didn't see anywhere where it said, okay, it's in the JED, the city is gonna approve development plans with JED board input, but they're gonna utilize B3 zoning. I didn't see that said that. So there's just sort of a gray area, and we just need some clarification.
How do we get the clarification? Because they're not, we should be able to steer them in the right direction.
I think that's the law department.
Yeah, I would suggest that we reach out to the Macedonia Law Director, who's also the Law Director for the JED, and he can provide some guidance on that. And Susan, if you could do that, or if you want me to reach out to him, or Chris, or whoever, but I think that's the procedure we should go through.
And I don't think there's anything that precludes this commission from issuing a preliminary plan approval. I think that's all fine, if you wanted to go that route, and you can issue stipulations. But the final plan approval, when that comes time, we should have these questions answered. And particularly for the applicant to know what sign criteria is being used. Yeah, 45 is clear, and that was just a mistake in my report. I had 40, it's 45 on the crossing, so that's very clear. What remains very unclear is, are dynamic displays allowed? I don't think there's any in the JED area, so are they even allowed? And if the answer is no, and you want the dynamic display, which is what it sounds like, then how do you appeal that, and who do you appeal it to? I don't know that answer, but it'd be nice for you to know that at some point. Yeah.
And the other thing, just, we're under the gun, we're on our last extension that we have with the seller, so, I think, after this meeting, we're down to, less than 60 days to button this up and or completely bail out, so, I feel like I'm Tom Klein, but at the, we're in the red zone here, so I'd like to, get the ball in the end zone if we can and get some of these answered. This JED's been a real complicating factor.
Can I ask a question? It's my oddball question. Does Mr. Klein live on the property, or is he?
I believe he lives behind the property, so he.
And so he's got the strip going all the way up to 82?
He's got a 7-foot strip, and then it actually turns then into a matching fat lot behind us. So it's a little strip that we're buying.
Yeah.
And then he's got a lot that we're not buying, like, you'd be be like a backyard, but it's a distinct lot.
Well, who owns the lot on 82 that you are buying?
We're buying that from Kaufman Tire. The primary buyer is Kaufman Tire.
Okay.
That we're buying from.
But, and so he owns this lot behind, I've seen that, it's an old beat-up house behind there, and it goes
Right,
up
so
to.
he lives in that house.
Yeah, I
from the
get you.
back. And, but there is you know, we're gonna grant an access easement through our shared driveway, that if that lot ever got developed.
Well, why does our preliminary plan have any implication at all with him? He wouldn't care less, would he, about what we do here? Why is that important?
It's just.
You said it was important that we get the preliminary plan done for him. You know?
Well, I'd rather touch off the record on that.
We just want to show everything's moving along, and you need him to finish it up, I guess.
Yeah.
There's likely some contractual reasons why.
Yeah. Well, I have no problem with the conditional approval, I guess, the preliminary plan.
What direction are we going? Preliminary, conditional, conceptual? Well, there's a whole lot of stuff here that needs clarification and.
If we don't give that, what happens? This is a general question, because I'm the newest one on this committee, so I asked a lot of maybe dumb questions, but if we don't give this preliminary approval, does that stop you from doing what you gotta do? You know what we're looking for, I mean.
Well, I guess the question is if, as the applicant, I would wanna know what's stopping you from granting preliminary approval. Because, you know, everything that's we're being asked to address.
I mean, legal, is there anything
addressable.
legal that happened if we don't give the preliminary, I mean, is it a showstopper for them? The reason being, we're sitting here saying, it's all this wishy-washy, we don't know what we're giving approval for, or even if conditional what? What are we conditionally approving?
Well, you definitely have approving authority pursuant to the addendum of the JED in 95. So you can approve, for sure.
Based on the JED.
I have structured my report substantially on the JED, or the crossings requirements, and they meet, you know, substantially meet those requirements. I mean, there's outstanding things, but for a preliminary plan approval, I don't have any problem, any concerns, subject to clarification when it comes time to final plan approval.
So preliminary plan approval, basically is saying we're okay with this concept. We think the building location is good. You know, the general architecture, you know, is good. There's still details work about signs and setbacks and access, and those things are gonna have to be worked out before any final approval. This is not committing us to, you know, you come back with the same thing and you haven't done anything by the next meeting where you're not getting an approval.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all the things in Brian's memo still have to be approved. Now, if we had a big problem, like, man, this building's gotta go the other way, we need to have, you know, two-way access on this side, and we just don't know how you can even possibly make this work. I think that's where we would say, we can't even give you a preliminary approval, because we're so in a different world on what we think the plan should be. But if we think in general, if you can work through all the details, and the 3-foot rather than 5-foot, and making your aisle, making your, all these different things, then we're probably gonna be on board. I think is kind of what we're saying if we give a preliminary approval. It's not locking us in to anything, but it's something that he can go with, okay, I know I'm not redoing the entire site, and I can tell Mr. Klein behind you that, you know, we've got these preliminary approval, still got some hoops to jump through, but this plan's not gonna change significantly. I'm not gonna all of a sudden flip over to this side and turn the building 90 degrees and all those kind of things. I think is what the preliminary approval is.
Kevin, would we have to also say, I don't see this in Brian's report, is it preliminary approval based on getting the easement from Mr. Klein? Is that in here?
Well, I don't think,
Or the acquisition from Mr. Klein, I think that's the word.
So I think that presents some interesting academic discussion. I worded it about cross-access being required in the JED, and so I think that's required between the parcel, the vacant parcel, and Giant Eagle. And how that gets worked out, is up to the applicant. I wouldn't specifically saying acquisition of a particular parcel in your motion. I would not recommend doing that.
I think more or less the requirements of the judge saying you have to have it. To not have the access, they're gonna have to get approval from the judge board, at least that's what we're thinking, is the process to do anything outside. So if you cannot get these access points, you're probably gonna have to go back to the judge board. We believe that's gonna be the process, and get them to relax the requirement, because right now that's a requirement that we can't. We don't believe we can waive that. We believe they would have to say that, and we'd have to accept it. Yeah, but decide if we accept that. You know, we can still probably require things on our own, but as of right now, that's a requirement. Rules.
And it only benefits you in the long run to have that
Right.
cross access.
Absolutely.
Because that, the turning movements are not just desirable.
Right, why don't we approve it then, the way you summed it up, Kevin?
Okay, before we do that, Joe, did you have some comments too?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'll briefly discuss my comments here. The site, the way in which it's proposed, naturally would require a reciprocal ingress-egress easement between the two separate parcels, the easterly and westerly property. So that would need to be finalized as part of the final plan approval administratively. Stormwater management-wise, I see that the detention pond area in the rear has gotten larger, and that can only be a good thing. I guess I would ask, what type of stormwater management feature are you guys proposing, and have you looked at the topography of the site to see what would work? Because it does appear to be a very flat piece of property.
That was, you're not looking for me to answer.
Any of the three of you.
I can turn to Amanda on that one. What Brett would you put on there?
He hasn't really said much other than
This is the area.
this is the area we're.
Yeah, we'll have to follow up with our civil engineer.
Yeah, if you could, yeah, I would think the commission would probably be interested in knowing if it's a wet pond, or if it's a dry pond, or underground storage piping, or some other type of feature. While we don't need a detailed design, we'd like to see something preliminary, I would think. So, and then also along those lines, since it's such a flat site, has a wetland delineation been performed on the site? Again, maybe that's a question for the civil design engineer. Yeah, 'cause we would certainly need some type of conformance, a wetland delineation, and either proof that there are no wetlands or a permit from the Army Corps to develop the site if there are wetlands. So we've already discussed the Klein property, so I won't speak to that anymore. And then also the ODOT approval for the site access, which we discussed at the last meeting. If you see in my memo there, I've even provided a blank application and the contact people. So my thought would be that the applicant could take the approval from the JED board and the application and your plan and submit it to the proper personnel there at ODOT. So, otherwise, that's all I've got, Chairman. I don't know if there's any questions on any of that.
All right, guys, have any more questions on what we've got?
I'll make a motion for preliminary approval based on criteria being met on the letter from Mr. Trans dated February 24th, 2018. Further, based on clarification from the city legal department on the JED rules and regulations as it pertains to the planning commission and the BZA.
City engineer's comments?
And city engineer comments will be picked up in the engineering, we don't normally include that in our motion.
Does it sound like acceptable?
It was well thought out. I agree.
Sure.
You just wanna go home.
No, it's just comprehensive.
So we've got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so, any more discussion on this? Does anybody have any, see any real problems with the plan? Because as we were talking, if we go with the thinking of preliminary plan approval, that we're generally in favor of the direction the plan is going. The drive-through provides a ton of space for cars. I mean, I don't see us having major redesigns unless someone's got a major problem with any of these. I think, like we were talking, there's a lot of little details to still work through. There's 5 feet, the 3 feet versus 5. I think the lining things up is not a big deal. Still got to get approval from ODOT, which I think I did talk to somebody there. They were aware of the Dunkin' Donuts, but I guess it was maybe were you proposing something same thing several years back?
Yeah, we were gonna do a strip mall about 3 years ago.
Okay, so they knew about that, but I
Right.
think they had.
Yeah, the original idea was to take the 2 lots and put up like a 3-unit building. And, history has shown that I'm not a very good landlord, so I'm out of the landlord business. I pour a mean cup of coffee.
But again, I think it's not gonna be an insurmountable thing to get there.
No, listen, what I heard were all things that I think we can in pretty short order button up and get done. So we just need to, work through the JED, work through ODOT, and it'll be my fight to figure out how to get the, electronic reader board.
Does anybody have any other thoughts
Yes,
before we take a vote?
If you have a problem with the word preliminary approval, why don't we just use conceptual plan approval?
Is
It's
that
a little
a
broader,
different thing though?
it's a little broader,
You really don't have that, I mean, we've used that term in the past, I mean, I hesitate, you have preliminary and final in the codified ordinances, so they're requesting preliminary, I don't see any reason why you can't issue preliminary, as I think as the chairman said, you're not locked down to anything. I really have been treating my review more of a form-based review. How does it fit onto the site? What's it look like? How does it function? As opposed to the sort of black and white criteria that says you must do this or X. So, and given that, I mean, I think it's a long bowling alley and they're making best use of it and how they're laying the building out on the site. They're being receptive to the cross-access issues and reducing and lining up drives. Again, I don't, as a professional, have any concerns with a preliminary plan approval contingent on the administrative comments, engineering, myself, and working those issues out and determining next steps for a final plan approval.
And then, to be clear then, I guess, Brian, if preliminary approval is granted, the applicant still needs to appear before Planning Commission, again, at a later date for final
For sure.
approval. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, or are we ready to take it out?
Mike, just a comment. The reason I had asked that before, what happens if we don't approve, was more along the lines of what Mr. Chabon said. If we're, and what you said, we like the concept, it looks like a good addition to the community. Things look pretty good, but there's a lot of details that have to be worked out. And sometimes the details can kill a project too. You wind up saying, I can't do all these details. So I was concerned if we approve something and then you hire a lawyer and come back and say, you gotta approve this.
No,
And
no.
I think what we're approving is we like the idea.
Yeah, it's conditional approval though, that's
That's
what.
a conditional.
Yeah, we made it conditional, so there's all these conditions that are on this sheet of paper, so I don't think a lawyer would be able to go far with that, saying, you've approved it. We've approved it conditionally with a ton of conditions.
Well, preliminary
Yeah,
conditional.
preliminary,
approval.
yeah.
I think preliminary approval.
And it's all documented into the record. You have minutes and, you know, from a legal standpoint, you have very little standing to argue. Otherwise, you've provided these details and you've made assertions based on the desire to have a preliminary plan approval with contingencies, and you've accepted that. it'd be a waste of your money to fight that legally for some reason.
And we, as developers, we know there's always possible roadblocks that are outside of just planning commission. Listen, we may go to try and do the stormwater system, and there could be issues. You know, we've done a geotech report, but, you know, that could, if we hadn't done that yet, that could have caused an issue where the soil wasn't conducive to pouring the foundation. So there's always incremental risk that we take along the way. And the preliminary approval, you know, gives us the confidence to keep spending money with these guys. Because if not, you know, at some point, as a developer, I have to pull the plug and stop funding.
All right, we've got a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Seconded that. Can I ask?
Second,
Okay.
I second, yeah, I second.
Oh, okay.
all right, any other miscellaneous?
No.
No? All right, let's just make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right.
We're
Finally returned to normal schedule.
Normal third Monday of March.
Didn't I give you the calendar?
I think that it's only Monday, or it's only January, February. It sounds like you have a big.
You never wanted that.
Oh,
It does look like a small dragon.
oh, here, I need everybody to sign
I
that.
think,
Suddenly,
Here, give me that one.
I have a feeling you and I can't use that one.
Abstracting. Is it just him doing the, you got
I have,
take care.
I'm usually done. Like, we
this out. So, the meeting date.
When I went to Monday, go
It's some kind of weird organization.
yeah, I mean, it's ready. I have that course.
I don't even know what job director is.
Okay, because it says, yeah, the date forwarded would be,
They have their own little league. Apparently they're liberal on the sign.
Chris, you sent
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Good luck.
yeah.
Well, he has it. Mark Canetti texted me, said he has it, so I think
Yeah.
I'll text him, and he never did get back.
This is still on
And I'll ask him. I think so, yeah. Yeah, it should go through the process.
Yeah, it's right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
Okay.
It's ready from my perspective.
Okay.
I don't know about the rest of the world, but.
Okay.